Enforced disappearances remain one of the most painful and cruel forms of repression. When a person vanishes without justice, without a name, it destroys families and spreads fear through entire communities. Unrepresented nations and peoples, those without political voice or state protection, are among the easiest targets. Working Group has raised urgent appeals about the disappearances of Sindhi and Baloch activists in Pakistan, taken for defending their people's rights. The Human Rights Committee has urged Pakistan to criminalize enforced disappearances and to engage and ensure real investigation. SIDA has reminded us that women, mothers, sisters, wives live with the endless pain of not knowing. In Russia, occupied Crimea, Crimean Tatars have been abducted and silenced. In Iran, Kurdish activists face secret arrests and executions. In China, Uyghur families are torn apart, their loved ones taken, their voices erased even abroad. These are not isolated cases. They reveal a global pattern where recognition and justice are denied. Disappearances becomes the language of control. We urge this council to act, protect unrepresented nations and peoples, ensure that speaking to the United Nations brings safety and not punishment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Geneva for Human Rights and the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organizations recall that the 2024 UN study on the right to development confirmed its individual and collective dimensions, its dependence on derivative rights such as participation and equality, and the challenges experts face in promoting these principles. In all regions, nations, and peoples' experiences reflect these findings. In Guam, the extensive U.S. military presence has deprived the Chamorro people of their right to development by seizing territory without FPIC, excluding them from decisions that shape their future and fueling environmental degradation, cultural erosion, and economic inequality that undermine their ability to preserve and develop their own culture and livelihoods. In Chittagong Hills tracts, land grabbing, forced evictions, environmental destruction, and development projects prevent indigenous communities from freely controlling and benefiting from their land and resources, as highlighted by numerous special rapporteurs. These examples show a clear correlation. Without recognition and representation, the implementation of human rights is weakened and the right to development cannot be realized. We therefore call on the Council to encourage states to strengthen NMIRFs, NHRIs, and local governance structures, ensuring inclusive participation. We also emphasize the essential role of youth, women, and girls as drivers of peaceful and democratic change.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the GDH and the UNPO. For unrepresented nations and peoples, arbitrary detention is not just an individual right violation, it is a tool of collective repression that silences a already marginalized community. In Kabylia, Algeria, activists face arbitrary detention, torture, and intimidation under anti-terrorism laws, creating fear and suppressing civic activism. In Iranian Kurdistan, the journalist Gina Modares Gorgi was arbitrarily detained, reflecting border patterns and of discrimination against Kurdish women defenders. In Annobon, Equatorial Guinea, military raids in 2024 led to 37 arbitrary arrests confirmed by the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. In Vietnam, the Khmer Krom faced systemic repression. At least 17 monks and defenders remain detained without due process despite UN findings on arbitrariness. These cases show a shared reality: arbitrary detention used to erase identities and silence entire communities. We urge the Council to press states to implement UN recommendations and ensure unrepresented peoples can safely participate in public life and human rights process. Thank you.
Ginebra para los Derechos Humanos y la Organización de Naciones y Pueblos No Representados celebran los informes del relator especial sobre el agua y el saneamiento, ya que reafirman que el agua y la energía son derechos humanos fundamentales y necesidades ecológicas que requieren gobernanza democrática, participativa y un acceso justo y y asequible. A las naciones y pueblos no representados se les niega con demasiada frecuencia el derecho humano al agua potable y al saneamiento, lo que deja a las comunidades desproporcionadamente expuestas a la pobreza, mala salud y abandono. En la isla de Alogón, los vertidos tóxicos y el abandono sistemáticos obligan a las familias a caminar kilómetros para recoger agua insalubre mientras aumenta la malnutrición y las enfermedades. En Zambezia, a los zambianos se les niega durante mucho tiempo el control sobre el río Zambeze. Los países vecinos y los ocupantes explotan sus recursos y agravan aún más la privación al drenar el agua y amenazar la seguridad alimentaria. Los árabes aguafíes de Irán ven como el humedal de al-Azim se derrumba bajo la sequía, la extracción de petróleo y la contaminación, dejando a las familias sin agua potable. Los Ogoni de Nigeria siguen sufriendo derrames de petróleo y la devastación medioambiental sin que se hayan cumplido las promesas de restauración. Instamos a los Estados a que pongan en práctica las recomendaciones del relator especial a través de los NMIRF, las INDH y la gobernanza inclusiva, garantizando la participación de las mujeres, los jóvenes, los pueblos indígenas, los campesinos y las personas con discapacidad.
Geneva for Human Rights and the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization draws attention to the situation of the Naga people, an indigenous people whose ancestral lands span India and Myanmar. The Naga case reflects global patterns affecting indigenous peoples whose territories are intersected by international borders. In line with UNDRIP, land and ancestral territories are central to indigenous identity, governance, and cultural continuity. Where borders intersect traditional territories, tailored measures are needed to safeguard cultural transmission, livelihoods, and community cohesion. International standards recognize the right of indigenous communities to maintain relations and cooperation across borders. Practical mobility arrangements can preserve family ties, seasonal land use, and cultural practices without compromising border management objectives. Durable outcomes are correlated with clear national-level recognition of indigenous peoples and mechanisms for their effective participation in decisions affecting them, consistent with recent priorities of the Special Rapporteur. In this context, and acknowledging ongoing discussions related to the Indo-Naga process, we respectfully propose a forward-looking avenue of dialogue and technical cooperation with India, focused on practical implementation of existing standards and community-level solutions. Thank you.